Mr. Hill, I understand that you want to run for mayor.
Absolutely. We're right in the middle of this race.
Okay, can you tell me what experience you have that qualifies you for this job?
So life's kind of an interesting thing. It has been building towards this my entire adult life, and even a little bit before then. Couple of real obvious things. My public safety background makes me a servant, and in the form of government we have, we're servants before anything else. That's a big thing for me. But you have to have experience also. So I was a businessman. I've been a businessman, again, 32 years. I've had small retail shops, and I've produced large events. I've had kind of several different major career type privately owned businesses. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and that experience gives you a different view of things. Mix those two things, plus 4 years as an elected official gives you an additional layer of insight, and it's left me with a really unique and kind of, I'd say, a perfect background for this job.
Good. That would mean that you think you're the best candidate.
Well, at this point, I actually do believe that I'm pretty far superior in the things that are messing with Jacksonville, that are hurting Jacksonville, that are affecting Jacksonville. For instance, crime. Crime's one of those things that if you really don't understand it at a street level, it becomes statistics and things that you can't adjust to. And when you realize it's just people interacting and there's problems, and you've been on the street and you understand how these things escalate, get out of control, you'll approach it differently. And that's one of the things that I bring to the table is I've seen the street level. I've been on more bad crime scenes than I'd like to remember, and seen the families, seen the reaction, understand how it escalates to the next level, and then it perpetuates. And that's a big part of what's happening here in Duval County. Many of these crimes are related to the last crime, and we have to intervene and get in front of that.
Do you think that that's the most important issue in this race?
Today, for the people in the area affected by crime, it's by far the most important issue. If you are in an area that isn't affected by it, you may not realize it, but it's only a matter of time before that actually makes it to your neighborhood. Crime doesn't stop spreading. It actually has to be intervened. You have to stop it through enforcement, which is obviously important. Police officers have their job, but I think we can do a much better job with interacting with some of these kids, and most of these are kids, at an earlier time, way before the crimes occur, work on their hearts, minds, their souls, and talk to these kids and get them to start valuing human life in a very traditional way. And that's just through mentorship. They have to have somebody they can look up to. Many of these kids literally don't have family in the home, or have a parent who's working 2 or 3 jobs to make it, so there's a poverty element to it that needs to be addressed. And we have to adjust, and we have to, as a government, accept that that's now, when it affects all of us the way it is, it's now up to us to intervene, which is very interesting for a conservative person to start adding things to the core function. But if we don't add this as part of our primary job as a government to address this in an early stage, it's only going to escalate.
That would lead me then to education.
Absolutely.
And the education would be needed to solve this problem.
So there's 2 layers: your traditional school, and then there's post-school or preschool education, which would be your mentorship, your family environment, and what I'm mostly talking about with the crime issue is your neighborhood environment, what you see every day after school, what you know to be the way to make money, what you know to be the way to survive and eat. Those things have to be addressed as almost a systematic relook at what's happening in these deteriorating neighborhoods and where these crimes are growing. And when you go back to the school side of it, you can also pick up an element of it in the regular school. But the problem is, teaching's tough enough as it is without adding raising as another element to it. So we need to separate the two. Teach the kids and raising the kids is a big ask for the school system. I think part of what Jacksonville needs to do is some post-school activities, not the traditional. I'm a big fan of the sports. Sports is awesome. It's very, very effective, but a little bit more than that. Some mid-teens and late teens activities that are not always sports related. Some mentorship, and that's clearly missing in Jacksonville.
We discussed crime. We also discussed the education. What would be the next 3 big issues that you would like to talk about?
Well, there's 3 big things happening right now. These are current events, and I really want to weigh in on them. One of them is the way we're treating our veterans, the things that are being done in the name of veteran affairs and veteran. You hear that name a lot and it's thrown out a lot. And our community has a really poor record of serving our veterans. We have a veteran homeless problem. We need to address that immediately. We have a memorial auditorium that is literally there to memorialize the valor and the sacrifice by veterans, and we're talking about selling it. And I can see there's some advantage for veterans, but I can see where they didn't get a very good deal. They got a terrible deal, and I'd really like to dig into that. The deal itself seems to be a lot more about things that are in the contract related to like tearing down the relatively new auditorium, things like concessions that don't really benefit our veterans in the way they should, and ATM placement. And there's a lot of pieces in this big contract that the public never got a whisper of. I want to dig into that. And then there's the landing. We just paid millions and millions and millions of dollars for something we already owned. I want to figure out how that happens. I'm very happy that the leaseholder wasn't smashed and thrown out on his, after all the years he struggled to keep the landing open. But I don't think the taxpayers got the best deal there. I think the city got themselves in a bind. I think the mayor overreached his effort to try and run him out and got caught into a lawsuit that was going to bite the city even worse. So I'm glad there was a resolution, but I don't think we got the best deal there. And then in general, the way things are being developed and the way things are being, literally demolished before we even get a whisper of it as public and then moved on, the infrastructure of the Hart Bridge Expressway coming down, that is slated to happen. It's moving really fast and the public's not really getting a town hall style weigh-in. And on things of that nature where they affect tens of thousands of people, I'd like to do town hall meetings and hear from the public. It may not be good or bad, but at least I want to hear from them. And I want an opportunity, if we do something big like that as a city, I want to be able to present it and stand by it instead of just doing it in the night and knocking it down and having to deal with it. And I want to know who's getting all the contracts to haul all this stuff to the dump.
Now, you said you do have a business background that you want to bring in to this job. Are you going to be able to establish more jobs if you're elected?
So I think the key is not always more, but better. And here's why I say that. Tourism's a great industry and it pays moderately well, but when you really look down into the numbers, if we build a tourism economy, those are not great paying jobs. There are very few great paying jobs in there versus technology versus, believe it or not, even the military, which is a very strong presence here. Those jobs are pretty decent paying jobs. All the fleet support, all the air wing support, all the stuff that we do here now, military related is good and we can build on that. But I'm not really excited about building a giant tourism stop here because the numbers and the types of jobs that they bring wouldn't be my first choice. Doesn't mean I'd rather see it develop organically. It's already going to happen. Let's develop it organically. Let's build around what does happen, but I don't want to throw money at that industry. I think visitors are a different thing. Convention business is a totally and entirely different business, a different type of tourism. I'd love to see us maintain control first off of our convention facility. I really don't want to see that in private hands. This administration seems to be heading in that direction. It seems very orchestrated, and that's problematic. There are a lot of things that this city can do better, and we have our finger on the pulse, and we're excited about it. But job growth is always going to be a focus.
I know that Jacksonville is an import center for shipping across the Atlantic,
Right.
and possibly even from the Pacific going through
Absolutely.
the Panama Canal. Could you comment on the shipping industry here in Jacksonville?
So Jacksonville's a city on the move. That's kind of it's something that stuck with me. We're a rail center. We're a transportation hub for over the road. It's literally where 95 and I-10 meet. If you think about that, that's the entire country. The southern half of the country gathers in Jacksonville at the east end. And then there's your port, and on top of that is aviation. We have a very vibrant aviation industry here, and FedEx moves a lot of freight. There's a very, very big transportation hub, and the port's critical for that. We're growing our port, we're dredging it, which is a big controversial issue, and I think we need to really make sure we don't do more damage than good, but I think that dredging is worth doing as long as there's a return for it. If we just dredge to dredge, I'm not happy about it. But we're trying to accommodate a class of ship that requires more water. We're trying to stay competitive with other ports. We have some major infrastructure that makes that a really good common sense thing, and there are some jobs. There's a whole element of the LNG, which is a kind of a switch from coal and other related energies to liquefied natural gas, and that's on the table. They've hit a couple of stumbling blocks with some of the infrastructure with that not many people know about, and I hope they can work through that. It's one of those subjects that there's no real downside to it unless we do it wrong. If we dredge and cut the river out and it caves in and we lose, some part of the river, or it silts and stays silted and never recovers, these are things we have to be aware of. And the Army Corps looks at them. They've been studied pretty well. I see some indication that there's some minor failure in some of the curve collapsed right away and some other stuff. These things worry me as a person that's out on the water that understands Jacksonville's waterways really well. I want to hear more about that. If I get into the mayor's office, I want to find out where we're at with some of that and actually dig into it, make sure what we think we're getting is what we're getting, because sometimes if no one's watching, we're not. But I think it's good overall. I think it's good for jobs. I think it's a good idea as long as it's well thought out, and we don't pay too much to get it done and never get our return. That's a good industry to look at.
You have a new governor here in Florida. Do you know him, and did you ever work with him?
So no, he's from the area. It's ironic, we've never crossed paths, and I don't work with him, but I'm very, very happy with his performance. He's reached across lines that people didn't expect. He's done things with the environment that we all, if you're really a Floridian, you know that the water is our lifeblood. It's the reason most of us are here. And this governor had the insight to reach down into the area where the most damage was being done, into the Everglades and other areas. He's looking at up in Central Florida. There's a similar situation with a dam that dried up an entire area. So he's making these moves to correct some of these big environmental blunders that this state has made, and paying for them, which is the other thing. And that's, but the problem is if we don't, we won't have tourism. Literally, it's starting to affect those dollars down south. So. And worse than that, we won't have a quality of life. So tourism is part of it, but our quality of life, what we do as Floridians, the way we use the water, I think he's made a major impact. But then he's also done some brilliant, just economic things. He's made some good moves across the board that suit. So far, everything I've seen him do is good. He did a big sweeping change. He took Common Core out of the schools recently, which is a big plus. So I'm happy with our governor, really happy with our governor.
And you can work with him?
Absolutely, and it's exciting he's from the area, so he's out of St. Johns County, south of Jacksonville, so he's not oblivious to Jacksonville, and I'm excited that he knows about this area. We don't have to bring him here and educate him. I think he comes home to this area, when he comes home. So I'm excited to not have to lobby him for what's wrong here. If it affects us, it affects him. So we'll find help there where we might not find it elsewhere.
How are the medical facilities in this county and in Jacksonville? Are they being supported by the public, or are they being drained?
So it's interesting. So medicine is one of those industries that I do think would be well worth investing in. Here's how government can invest in them. Infrastructure to get to and from medical facilities is a big deal. And we have Mayo Clinic and some other really important research related and a little bit more advanced treatment type facilities. Most of the local hospitals are staying cutting edge as a result of that. It's actually helping drive it. We're not really overloading the medical situation. In some of the areas, like in the trauma center occasionally, there's a single trauma center for the area. They're working on a second. It may actually be in place by now. But so we're growing medical treatment well enough. But if you think about it, if someone comes here from anywhere, and several of these facilities constantly have visiting patients, and they spend a month or two here getting their treatment, that's an economy. That's a great thing to harbor. So infrastructure, transportation is the other big issue when you're here visiting. You may not drive during that process. Transportation is an area the city can help. But I think we're not far off on that, and it's the reason I love it so much. It developed organically. The government didn't fund a whole lot of it. It just was done by business that understood business, and there is always going to be a better end solution when it's not artificial. And I think Mayo Clinic's kind of cutting the edge on that. They took a different part of town, put a big medical facility in it, they've been good neighbors for the most part. They create some traffic and stuff like that, but that's where your government comes in and puts the right roads in and can absorb all that. So I'm excited about that as an industry as a whole because it's good for everybody. And then the locals who live here have access to premium high-end medical care without having to fly somewhere to get treatment. So it's been a big, big plus.
In the news, they keep saying that people are leaving high-tax states and going to low-tax states.
True.
Can you tell us about Florida's situation in that regard?
So Florida's collecting a lot of transient tax immigrants. They leave other areas because they had different tax situations. Our problem, and Jacksonville is one of those places where a lot of people would just go by and go south, but we've been discovered. Now they don't go south. Now lots and lots of people move into the area. The cost of living is lower here for a whole lot of different reasons. The cost of housing is lower here. Our new dilemma is our school board situation. Our school system is being outpaced by the community just south of us. So we have our own set of migrant blight. We're losing children, education age families to St. Johns County because of a perception that the school board our school system is doing a better job down there. So we have to work on that. I think it has to be worked on, it has to be addressed. We have to sit down with our school board here in Jacksonville. The city and the school board the city government and the school board have to sit down and address specifically that issue because they're going to start hurting us in the wallet and we're going to start coming up short on funds and we're going to have to look at different ways to try and stay competitive. So I think we need to address it. There's several ways the city can help and there's a lot that the school board itself can do to face that issue. And it's a migratory thing. They're actually moving south of here or sometimes west or east, which is kind of bad. So we're excited about engaging in that conversation. It's a part of the sub-function of the mayor's position and mostly just connecting the dots and making people sit down and solve problems. That'll be my primary focus.
Are the present zoning laws helping Jacksonville grow?
So no, and it's really interesting. So one of the things I was most excited about when this last administration came into office is there was a lot of talk, even at the inauguration for the person that most of us voted for, that there'd be liaisons for business and that we would change the business ground. That was very exciting because it was something Jacksonville's needed for many years. And very little of that happened, if any. I haven't seen any signs on the street that it's easier to do business here. A good example is a district called the Railroad District, and it's a set of business people, large number and a big footprint, and they have all struggled because they have eclectic buildings. They have they're repurposing old structures to do new businesses. And the laws are very strict on many of those things unnecessarily. There are ways to deal. I was a certified fire inspector, so I know, I was a state fire marshal qualified person for many years, and laws are made to accommodate not block, and they're being applied to the maximum level. Not just fire laws, by the way, but local ordinances, building codes, all of these things. They make it almost impossible to do something interesting and new and exciting with spaces that are challenging to start with. We really need to get creative in that area. We need to stop being picking the largest, hardest obstacle and figure out ways to make sure the public safety concerns are all met. That's critical, number one thing. If you're going to do a space meeting or something of that nature, you got to be able to vacate people, deal with the fire issues, deal with the safety issues, make sure it's structurally sound, all that. But we're taking all of these businesses to the maximum level of compliance instead of looking for the least expensive way to comply. And I would go with the second model as a leader. I think that's a better way to work, is don't try and add everything to it. Make it safe, but affordable, and that's what needs to happen. And right now, that's not what we have. It's the most challenging business environment that we've had in a long time, and it was supposed to get better.
Okay. My last question, sir, is can you sum up what you would like to do in your first 6 months in office?
So the reason I'm running probably more than anything else is to return the people's voice back to the government, remove some layers that happen. A lot of our government functions in the back room right now, where it used to, and by law should, function in sunshine. I want to get that piece of our government fixed. And one way to do that real quickly is to restore and reinstill the power that was once designed to work inside of your city council. Your city council person right now is somewhat, just neutered. They're not able to do a lot because everything's political now. Everything in Jacksonville is political, and that's somewhat normal in government. But you shouldn't be trading your pothole repair, your infrastructure repair, your street light, whatever it is, shouldn't be a political pawn in a table game. So I want to restore the integrity, restore the government back to the sunshine, and then give the city council their power back. And the way that works is actually pretty simple. It sounds like, oh, well, what are you going to do about it? It's easy. You put the core function of government back on autopilot. You put planners, not political players, but planners in charge of where your libraries go, your streets go, where your repairs take place, where your sidewalks are done. Right now, every one of those things is on a political table. And if you don't take if your city council person doesn't play that political game, your neighborhood becomes that one that's on the news next for being the blighted, the downtrodden. So part of it is return the role of checks and balances back to government the way it was. And it's not like you go in and turn the table over and make a mess. You just restore integrity and put your staff and your planners and everybody to work, working towards what the need versus criteria. So if you have the most kids in a neighborhood and they're walking where there's no sidewalk, you do a very simple survey, find out where that is, that place gets the sidewalk next and next and next. So it's kind of a rethink of what we're doing now. Right now, it is all political, and that's not correct. It's not the way it should be.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on today.